So here's a fun question. What was Labour's performance on reducing emissions during their first term? Have you seen the answer anywhere? Have, any climate groups covered it? Have any media outlets covered it? Did Labour reduce emissions? Did emissions rise during their first term? You probably haven't seen an answer. I find this a little bit weird because it feels like an important question during an election. Did a party succeed at tackling one of the biggest problems in existence today? I'll give you a quick answer. Emissions from stuff that's burnt in Australia, pretty much the same. And Australia pretty much exports roughly the same volume of fossil fuels. You would have heard a lot about Australia's renewable energy having gone up. It has gone up. But what happened is it went up a lot for the first half of their term, and then it stopped going up for the second half of their term. Renewables are about 39% of Australia's main grid, but the modelling that Labor relied on before they were elected assumed it would reach 50% by this point. It should be at 50% according to their modelling. So that's a really significant slowdown. So emissions fell in Australia's grid for the first year, but then they kind of stagnated after that. And the drop in emissions from the power grid was actually kind of undone by rising emissions in the transport sector, the continued extraction of coal and gas. And I also found out that the last quarter of last year, Australia exported its highest ever amount of thermal coal ever. Not a lot happened in terms of climate. We're talking about 3 years here. That's a third of the total time in the critical decade. And it's just so weird to me that it feels like something that you're not really meant to talk about if you're a climate supporter or a climate activist. I guess the logic that I've seen for this is that if we're too critical of Labor, they may not get elected, and an even worse alternative, like Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party, would get in, which fundamentally I don't agree with that logic that you should basically withhold something important tactically to get into power. That doesn't feel right at all. But also, Labor are doing pretty well in the polls right now, so I don't think that taking an honest look at their climate record is going to be the thing that kills them and ends up with Peter Dutton in power. It's just a ridiculous premise. I think that failing to criticize centrist governments on climate is a self-sustaining feedback loop where they kind of realize that all they need to do is kind of make the right noises just before an election. And then once they're elected, they can kind of just do what they like. If emissions get reduced by accident, that's fine. They don't ever have to take any political risks or do any convincing of anybody. They can kind of just do climate action where it fills the gaps, but never actually take any action beyond that. I think it's right to talk about how much of the current failure to date is down to the fossil fuel industry and conservatives and misinformation and stuff like that. I don't know. Elections like the one in Australia or the one in Canada, they really remind me that part of it is actually also we kind of heard the right noises. We kind of heard politicians talking about 1.5C, etc. But their actions were actually aligned with 3C or 4C. Saying the right thing and then continuing to do the wrong thing is something that we should almost treat as worse than someone who is actively and openly setting out to sabotage things, because that's more subtle and more insidious, and it really gets people's guard down. The Australian Labor Party, for instance, has a lot of support from people who would otherwise be strongly opposed to the type of things that they do. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a bigger problem and we need to do something about it.